That's not what anarchy is. Anarchy comes from Christ. What's the crime here? I don't know that. I don't know that.
Yeah, no.
I'm filming it.
You harass people all day.
Don't tell me not to film it. You're on the wrong side of history if you're telling me not to film it. The truth will set us free. You can tell me the truth, and I can tell the cops the truth. You're on film, guys. You're on fucking film!
Standing,
You're on
not
film,
really
you
knowing
violent
what to do,
people.
just random bystanders.
You're on film,
as
Megan.
if considering whether to intervene. And it's actually not something you see very often because sadly, usually when you see bystanders, they actually aren't standing at all. They're walking or running immediately away because they already know with absolute certainty that they do not want to intervene in anything ever.
Bodily autonomy
But
is
these
universal and
bystanders
inalienable.
were different, but they weren't. They were just normal people.
Doesn't mean you should
So I knew the
assault him. Two
situation was
wrongs don't
different.
make a
These
right.
people
That's
were
why you
standing there, just
incarcerate
normal
people
people,
without
not sure if
assaulting
they should
them.
intervene. And I thought, oh,
That's why we have a nation of
okay,
laws.
it's time for me, the outlier, to get on his bike and bike over there and start
Incarcerate
recording and see
rapists.
what's going on.
Oh,
and
so
I
don't
saw a
incarcerate
figure on the
rapists? Is that
ground,
the
someone
idea?
on top of him, like
Oh,
sitting
read some
on him,
fucking
which
Trotsky,
is,
Megan.
you know, a way someone could die. And two
Read
people
some fucking
hitting
Trotsky,
from either
Megan.
side. And fourth person, known as Big D, came up to me and said, oh, don't record this. He's like been an asshole or something like that. And later there was an accusation that he was a rapist. I didn't hear that in the initial explanation from D, which makes me, I say that not because, if I had heard that, therefore there's no due process and just assault anyone. I say that because it makes me think that it was kind of an add-on, because that one seemed like the moral justification, but the motivation was that he was being annoying at that exact time or something like that, which is, makes no fucking sense. It's just an excuse for people's bad behavior when people reason in that manner, right? Anyway, so at that point, as I was just saying to a friend of mine who I ran into and talked to about this, it just happened, because I was trying to look for the victim staggering around. At that point, a switch flipped in my head, because as soon as somebody says, don't record this, well, it means they're guilty, right? That's why we record the police. So I immediately said to Big D, I said, what are you talking about? Don't record it. If you say don't record it, then I'm definitely going to record it. If you say don't record it, you're on the wrong side of history. And I shouted at the crowd of three people who were on top and beating at this guy, because I just wanted them to stop, because, they should use their words. The guy was, by the way, like, even if cops were doing this, you would say, whoa, whoa, whoa. So, yeah. Real double standard from Ms. Megan Kinch, defund the police, when she's worse than the cops. So I wanted them to stop. I said to D, I don't know. Like, he's saying, oh, but there's some justification. I said, I don't know that. This is why, by the way, I didn't say this then, but by the way, I'm saying this to you, dear reader, that the fact that I don't know that is why we have courts, because otherwise you get two bands of vigilantes fighting each other over what to do. So I, believe it or not, was not in the favor of the beat him to death camp. So I filmed him and them attacking him and shouted, you're being fucking filmed, and did nothing. And it's kind of like when you spray hoses on dogs who are having a fight. At first it just does nothing. And, well, the hoses can do nothing at all. It took a second for someone, they didn't know who it was because their backs were turned. It took a while for someone shouting angrily at them, you're being fucking filmed, you're on camera, you're being filmed, for there's some kind of rational mind to kick in. And let's note here that rational mind only kicked in at the moment of self-preservation. They weren't assaulting accused rapists rationally, right? They were pummeling at a guy in the street for their own personal gratification, which is what I ultimately concluded. But you might rightly say that I haven't proven that yet. And that's because I haven't told you the whole story yet. And I'm talking about a story that I've already experienced. Bear that in mind, because I find a lot of people do that when I'm telling them a story. Maybe they're used to me making abstract arguments. Like, that doesn't follow. I'm like, yeah, but I'm telling you a story, and believe it or not, that's not the end of the story. So, in the most absurd justification of violence, after I shouted at them and said, this is a nation of laws, we have due process, we can incarcerate this person, you know, at the very least, I didn't add on all the subtle details, because in the middle of, again, it's not beating this guy, but, you know, they could explain to me, you know, if they think this guy is bad, why did they tell me? Is he gonna rape me? Or my friend? You know, if you think that I'm not rapeable, sorry, I guess I'm a bad example, but it doesn't matter. Are they gonna rape someone else because you didn't tell me? So the very same epistemic standard that is needed to justify beating the rapist is needed to actually protect from the rapist, but it isn't needed if all you want to do is gratify yourself by indulging in violence. And it's what the left has become. I mentioned Megan Kinch in particular because you can read her writing. She's a leftist who stopped speaking to me because I insisted that ghosting is wrong online. I also said that lying is wrong. And you can argue weird exceptions to that, but it really doesn't change the default. And, you know, moral absolutism isn't absolutely perfect, but a pretty damn good first approximation. Lying is wrong, ghosting is wrong, and assault is wrong. And, oh yeah, I also shouted them 2 wrongs don't make a right, which also should be really simple math for people. It's, oh yeah, and I explained to them, this is why we incarcerate people instead of just doubling down on the same wrong thing, which is physically attacking people. I'm not going to say that I'm completely against capital punishment, but it needs a pretty high fucking standard of evidence, not Megan Kinch says you're a rapist. So, the justification that was really so sick, and I've heard it before actually in this town. I've heard it directed at me as if it matters who's talking, which of course that's just another sort of mental failure to think that, but as if it matters who's talking, saying, oh, you're supposed to be an anarchist, something like that. And actually, I forgot to mention earlier, when the bystanders who weren't sure whether to intervene were standing there, she said something like, one of that group said something like to her friend, she said, I don't know, I just can't handle the anarchy of it all. And the irony of it all is that after I heard about that comment about the anarchy of it all, I remarked to them as I was slowly accelerating towards the site of the crime, that anarchism, that's not anarchy. Anarchy comes from Christ. And anyone who reads the first use of the word from Proudhon and reads his treatment of Christ will understand that immediately if they understand what they're reading. So anyway, it's not anarchy. It's called violence. At any rate, it's also not consent culture, which is the whole point. So, and trust me, there are ways to get people to leave the park without touching them. I've done it many times. I got a woman to leave Burger King who was smoking crack without putting a finger on the lady. You know, it's something my mother taught me, I guess, but it just further goes to show that what's really going on here is not about deterring crime, it's about control and violence, indulgence in violence. And it's rampant on I'm not saying it's not also rampant. See, what's rampant on the right is something different. They have a completely different set of excuses. So I'm not saying, just like with men and women, they have different bugs. The left and the right have different bugs. I'm not trying to do the left, the kind of bullshit. You know, I'm going, just look at my political compass. I'm going for the other way, guys. But we'll be starting the anarcho-socialist party soon. We'll include anarcho-capitalists because there's no other place to get them to leave the conservatives. But I digress. So she said, you're supposed to be an anarchist. And I said, oh, just go read some fucking Chomsky, Megan. Because if you read any Chomsky, you'll understand his very cogent reasoning that establishes the objective truth that some power is justified. For instance, incarcerating rapists. Because she's like, oh, how can an anarchist say you should incarcerate a rapist? Well, you're the one beating him almost to death, potentially. You don't know what's going to happen. You're too drunk to think about that. Everyone sits and drinks in that corner. Alcohol is disgusting, guys, by the way. In addition to violence and assault, it's just all very disgusting. And so then people started trying to charge at me because I was filming them assaulting someone. I was filming them breaking the law. And then they're charging at me as if I'm the one. Like, the law is pretty clear, guys, and not just the law, like the moral arguments for the law. I hope that distinction's clear. We're not talking about fucking cannabis law. We're talking about assault, which is supposed to be the whole motivation. You're like, assault is bad except when I do it. That's what making Kinch is like, and whoever those two people were assaulting that guy with her, because if they really wanted to reform this guy, they'd engage in some kind of moral confrontation, which is, by the way, what I did start to attempt with him. So after he was beaten up, he started kind of leaving the park. He was evidently drunk from the way he spoke and a bit confused. I don't know if that was so much from the drunkenness or from concussion. So I didn't really know what kind of concussion death risk there could be. I know that can be very surprising. Someone could take one hit and seem fine. And that's why you should never hit anyone, right? It's just, even if you're a sociopath, you should never hit anyone because you would kill someone and go to jail. So I hope that's not the argument you need, but it's the argument we need to give you if you're a sociopath. And Jesus Christ. So bear in mind, it's not lost to me that they told me this guy's a rapist. I just took great pains to explain why assault is not the way to deal with rapists. I mean, obviously, because that's the whole objection in the first place, that it's assault. Anyway, so so I started telling the guy, you know, some girl came down and tried to tell us both to come back to the park, ironically enough, which was really dumb, I guess. Well, I didn't listen to her. I think she was trying to dissuade me from calling the cops or the ambulance, or maybe she had been telling them to stop. I don't know who she was, but he kept going south and I kept going south, and he got chatting with the bouncer outside a handlebar. There was a crowd there. He was kind of dazed, right? And he was a bit rightly confused about my motives, because I didn't want him to die, but I also did want to find out if he was actually a rapist, obviously. So he was talking to people outside the bar, and he had blood running down the side of his head. It was coming out of his temple. So, you know, blood coming straight out of your temple. Oh, hi, kitty. There's a cat here where I'm riding around recording this. He had blood coming right out of his temple as he talked confusedly to people. So it's like, you gotta do something about that. And he seemed a little cagey about involving the police, which is not proof of guilt, of course, but it is evidence. The fact that it's not proof when a woman doesn't want to report a rape, but I was saying to him, hey, dude, you were just assaulted. I'm your witness. Let's go report it to the police. Yeah, let's go do it. I'll support you. Dude, you were assaulted. I didn't quite sound that saccharine, but, I'm trying to give you a simple, not reenactment, but theatrical summary of the content. Anyway, so, yeah, he didn't really want me to call the police. And then he went to the people at the bar. He wanted to go in the bar, but he wanted to just drink more. You got blood pouring out of your temple, you want to drink more. Obviously, the story doesn't recommend any of these people, but there are so many teachable moments that, here we go. And so he went into Handlebar. He tried to go into Handlebar. They wouldn't let him in. And especially because I was already explaining what had happened, that this crowd of people were calling him a racist and assaulting him. And I did explain that to the people outside. And I told them that I was trying to determine if he wanted me to call the police or if he wanted to walk to the police at Toronto Western, where they're often sitting, to at least tell them what's happened, And start his paper trail. That's what you got to do. If you are going to press charges for assault, the sooner you can get official records, because I wasn't sure if my recording had worked. Actually, I'll have to check after I make this recording, because this is audio, and video recordings kind of stop when your battery's low. They stop. Some of your settings, they stop preemptively. Anyway, little known fact about apps: check your settings, folks. Anyway, so he didn't really want to involve the police, which is telling. And in two different senses, I hope he's not a rapist, and I hope that he is, and that I would prefer, obviously, always be equal. You prefer a rapist being assaulted to a non-rapist, right? And that logical sleight of hand is how this kind of thing gets justified, because that's not the comparison. Read my article, compared to what, for this general cognitive tool that's being exploited in its absence in this kind of situation. what we're comparing is not beating up a rapist to beating up a non-rapist, right? We're comparing assault to not assaulting people. That's supposed to be the comparison. In a consent culture, you don't assault people because you don't need to get physical vengeance. You have a system of courts and laws and the court of public opinion. And you can actually morally reform one or two people. You can at least make them feel guilty long enough that they'll be sheepish, depending on the severity of this. But, there's some people, you can correct them and their face changes. And the thing about this assault of this guy, I was also explaining to my friend that I ran into in the neighborhood right after it happened, which is just a few moments before now, that in this case, let's say the guy is a rapist, he was assaulted, he walked away with no visible change on his face. He didn't learn anything. In fact, he unlearned something because he learned the falsehood that he's the victim. And let's be very careful. I wouldn't deny that he's a victim because I do agree that assault is a crime, and even when you assault criminals. But he's not the victim, of course. Even if he's innocent, there are victims elsewhere. The world is full of victims. No one is a unique victim. Everyone is one among many victims of the system, of maybe the crimes of one of their parents, crimes of one of their exes. You have to pick what you're, not pick, but you have to distinguish between being a unique victim and just everyone's got a different list of things that they're victims of. Some are obviously much worse. So he didn't want to phone the cops. In fact, he said to the folks at the bar a couple times, he was like, "Oh, this guy's following me." And every time he said that, I said, "Dude, I'm your witness. Do you want to report the assault?" And he always seemed a bit unsure as to whether he wanted to report the assault. I understand being unsure about wanting to report an assault. Obviously, that's the standard story of why women don't report assault. And it's also why I didn't report assault, not because I was guilty, because I was a drug dealer. I was guilty of selling weed. So, people can have all sorts of reasons for not wanting to talk to the cops when they're assaulted. And reasons for wanting to survive when they are. And, unfortunately, I lost track of where the guy was walking to, and I'm recording this right after biking around trying to find him, to see if he passed out somewhere in his head, or if he just went bloodied into another bar, or sought medical attention, or legal help, or moral help if he indeed is a criminal. But the 911 operator was training another 911 operator, which became a bit of a farce call. I was trying to get them to kind of end the call after it was no longer useful, because I'd given them information. They were sending somebody over, and I'm like, "Oh, I just lost track of him." So I go looking for him, and instead of them saying like, "Oh yeah, don't lose track of him because he might have a concussion and he might pass out and die," they say, "Oh, don't tell someone to go to the hospital. Tell them to wait at a specific place so we can find them." First of all, I couldn't tell him to do any. What I had just told him is that I told him where he could go speak to the cops, and then he didn't listen. And then he's telling me, "In the future, don't tell people that." It's like, well, first of all, who cares? Because he wasn't listening to me anyway. And he's trying to demonstrate for his trainee, this is how you do it. Okay, always tell people to stay put so that we can reach them. No, not always. In this case, the guy was walking away, and without me, they're not going to be able to find him probably. So the guy distracted me long enough that I lost track of him. I was going to just, make sure that he didn't pass out when he turned around the corner or something. He was pretty dazed. You pass out, fall down, hit your head again, and that can be the part where you die. So the guy passed out because he was a drunk, got really bad brain injury for years, and then he was a real problem for everyone. You think this guy gets brain damage, he's going to be easier to deal with? Holy fuck. It's going to be a nightmare. So that's the story, I guess. Megan Kinch assaulted this guy with the help of two other criminals.